Amazing, cool. So first of all, LC Beats, difficult act to follow, some amazing, side hustles going. I will do my best to keep you all entertained and engaged and hopefully learn something and maybe just feel like you see a bit of yourself in some of the stories I tell today. So I hope you're well from wherever you're joining. My name's Tara. I'm going to kick off by telling a tiny bit about me. Because I think whenever you're in this instance where you're talking to a lot of people you don't know, you need to care a little bit about me to care about what I'm going to say. So I would say, first off and foremost, I'm a connected human. And to me, what that means is that my gut and my head and my heart are all connected and aligned. And I think you need that to be your authentic self. And I take that with me into each context. I'll be the same person on a Sunday morning with my kids as I will on Wednesday evening presenting to our board overseas. And my approach to work and life is really aligned. And today you'll see I'm quite an open book. Everything's on the table. But for me, I think that's important to provide the space for people around me as well to be able to explore who they are authentically if they want to do so. So if you were to do a LinkedIn lookup, you would see a bunch of things that I've done and roles that I've played. So as Nicole mentioned, in the professional capacity, the roles that I play today are a managing director, also a lecturer, and also facilitator. I think it's a good call out with this group to say, I'm not a creative by background, but I work in the creative field and I play that role of translation between business and creative. I understand the power of creativity and why the world needs more of it. And so I very much try in my work to create that greenhouse for great creativity to happen. But beyond those titles, I play a variety of roles, as we all do. Most importantly, I'm a mum of three. I have a 10-month-old, a 2.5-year-old, and a 38-year-old. No, I love you, sweetie. You're wonderful. But on any day, I can be wearing any number of hats, which means you have competing interests. You have conflicts that occur every day. And it's really not always smooth sailing. And certainly not when you consider what's going on with the world, which is why today I agreed to talk about this topic of stress. It's something familiar to all of us, and I'm definitely intimately acquainted with it. And I wanted to talk about this today because I do think that it can be a force for good. It tells you when you need to change something, and often the only way to initiate that change is when you feel tension. You need that burning platform either at an individual level or collectively. And it can really push you to reach some limits, to deal with things so you can get through times when you might feel like there's no way out. And the way I'm doing the talk is just about sharing some stories, some experiences I've had about stress, what happened, and what I personally took away from it. So in my work journey, I've continued to keep moving into more senior roles because I really just wanted to keep fixing the problems I saw above me. Projects were sold wrong, or there wasn't enough time, or we didn't push back on the client enough. And probably most importantly, people were not treated well. And I thought if I could just be more senior or a lead or a director, I could fix all of those things and it would just get easier. Or after feeling really stuck in delivery, if I moved upstream to like strategy and scoping out the projects, it would just make it easier for everyone. And on that journey, I learned that it doesn't get easier. It just gets more complex and it does get harder. And if you think you could just get into that position to fix these things, it would be easier, but there's always that next thing that's something else that's harder and more complex to tackle. But you learn how to scale yourself and you learn to let go of the things that have made you successful, like saying yes to everything and doing it all yourself. Because if you don't do those things, you actually just won't survive. The stress and the pressure and the workload can actually just completely crush you. So I think there's two leaps you make as a professional. One is going from managing self to managing others. And I would say a lot of people don't make this transition very successfully. We all know people who just shouldn't be managing others because they don't understand how to structure work or motivate or give feedback. But another big leap you'll take is what success means. So you really have to reframe what success means to you and how you achieve it. You go from being successful because of what you did to actually becoming successful because of what others around you are able to do. And that means your ego needs to take a back seat because you're not the limelight, you're an enabler, and you need to support those around you to really be doing their best work. So I think with those two leaps, they taught me that the work is easy and people are hard. And the more senior you get, the more fires you get. People come to you when things are not going well, and resolving things is often ad hoc. and there's no rule book, and stress really just becomes a fact of life. So what does stress mean to me? Stress is that feeling between something happening and my reaction, and it could be someone brought an escalation to me, something's gone wrong, a client isn't happy, a team member isn't performing well, a key client wants to go, and you really have that choice on how do you want to react. And so in that space between those two things, stress often lives in this space. It can paralyze you and it can rob you of sleep. And I would say I've definitely felt those things, probably on way too many occasions. And those situations probably aren't going to go away altogether. So what we all need is a way to handle stress. We need a way to recognize it, to process it, and to experience handling it in order to get better at just working through it. And it's that built-in response to danger. It might be real or imagined. It might be right in front of you, or it might be further away. But interestingly, our bodies have no idea what the difference is. So part of the talk, what are some 3 types of stress? The American Psychology Association said there's 3 of them: acute, episodic, and chronic. And so I thought just to break it down, to think about the types of stress so we can recognize them would be useful. So an acute one, so this week I'm late for an important meeting because I've moved house and I don't know the way to get to daycare. And I get there and my tantrum throws the most glorious, dramatic tantrum in the car park and refuses to go inside. That's acute stress. You get frazzled straight away and your blood pressure shoots up and you get a migraine from it. And interestingly, about acute stress is our minds often extended. You might have something that you just sort of replay over and over again, and it keeps you up at night. And it could be that you're worrying about the future or a deadline. But the good news about acute stress is it often subsides. And a lot of us are really good at techniques to kind of help calm us. I think the other 2 are more interesting to think about how we deal with. So the second one is acute stress that sort of comes in episodes. And there's these sort of mini crises that regularly come up, and you can feel like you live in this state of tension. And it could be that you're taking on too much, or you're really just overburdened by life, and you're really susceptible to this if you tend to worry. And if you are one of these, feelers, and externally regulated, this can be something that really impacts you. I get this feeling often when I've worked myself into a position or a role when I feel like I'm not adding value, and I get this really big sense of urgency and impatience that I've only got so much time and I really want to get shit done and I really want to make a difference and it has to matter. And I'll have this episode of like feeling stuck and needing to get out of it. And that's probably why I move roles quite often, to make sure that I'm in that place of adding value. And the last one is chronic. So this is that like grinding stress that wears down over years. And they say it can come from like serious life problems that could be fundamentally outside of your control, like poverty and war or racism. But I would argue you could say COVID is low-grade chronic stress because we can't do anything about it. It's always just there and you don't know when it's going to stop. And you really just need tools to get through day to day. And interestingly, in this situation, they say many people actually just give up fighting for change and they just begin to accommodate it in their lives. They stop fighting and they just try to live with it, which is something to really be thinking about. How do you cope with these types of stress? So I know this is all quite depressing, but I do think there is good stress. I think the frustration to grow, the frustration to want to learn, being bored, wanting more from your leaders, wanting new experiences, wanting to travel and wander, the stress of the unknown because you threw yourself in the deep. I think those are all really, really good forms of stress. But I would also say there's good to find in situations that are stressful that might feel very negative because you can evolve as a person. That it's really never what happens to you, but it's very much about, how you deal with it. And when I was thinking about this topic and this group, as a starting point, I really believe that being a creative is inherently stressful, especially if you do it in a commercial world, because you put a bit of yourself in every piece of work you do. You've got deadlines, people judge you, they quantify it. The scope is altered, so you can, not just do quite enough in polishing to get right. And also you probably knew this when you went into it, when your parents asked you to be a dentist and you said, no, I'm still going to do what I want to do. And now you're here. So congratulations on that, because I do think it's worth it. So for me, I broke up these stress experiences into three categories. One is good, good, one is good, bad, and one is bad, bad. The ones that are what I call good experiences of stress are when you have like a big challenge ahead of you and you're like, will I make it? Where you're in the state of flow and just before you're entering freakout stage, really pushing yourself, adrenaline's going, and you're basically like telling yourself, all right, giddy up, let's do it. So the first experience I wanted to share of good was I was approached to take the managing director role on for us2 in Sydney. I wasn't super happy in my current role, but I was also, expecting my first child, my second child, sorry, was 4 months pregnant. And I went through all those interviews and, presented this 90-day plan to the company board and received an offer and thought it's never real until you actually get an offer. But then I got the offer and I just got scared. And it wasn't really good timing for anyone. And so I called the CEO and I said, you know what, I really can't take the role. I wouldn't feel right taking it. I'd be there for 6 months and then I'd have to step away for 6 months and you really need a new leader. And he was like, no, we want you. In fact, it would be against our values not to take you on. You're absolutely the right person. And I was really taken aback by that. And I was like, all right, it's on. There's no bigger deadline than, me going on mat leave. There's a lot to do. We need to make changes, we need to fill a pipeline, and we need to do it yesterday. So that stress of quickly getting to understand the people and the team and the business and what levers do you pull to turn things in the right direction really brought the best out in a lot of people. And that stress of feeling really accountable to people because you care, I think is really good stress, that you want to leave things in a really good place. And you want to push yourself as hard as you can and find that limit. And you want to walk that line for you, but also the people around you of pushing that limit. And the great news is that when you start to see signs of it working, it's really important recognition to know that the unrest that you felt and the stress you felt, you flipped it into motivation because you wanted to do the right thing. The next example of good stress that I thought was interesting was when the role I took as design director, and I asked somebody, if you could do anything on a project, what would it be? And this question made a really big impact. It created a really stressful situation, but it had a really good outcome. And I think sometimes you need to just load yourself up to get to something greater. Like we often are just stuck in the day-to-day, and sometimes you need to push yourself to really do that leveling up. So I joined the service design agency. I came in really senior and I knew I had to prove myself. People are basically seeing how I'm doing and, watching every step I make. And the other thing I noticed was that everything in terms of deliverables for clients was just in print. So we did posters and journey maps that were meters and meters long, but we were designing concepts for the future, which was a bit of an interesting play. And in this studio, I heard that there were some really good people to watch out for, people that were really good. And I was like, I need to find a way to get them on the project. So in getting to know everyone in the studio, I asked this one person who wasn't on my team, what's that one thing you do if you could do anything on a project? And he was like, oh, I'd want to build a website, like as a deliverable, not a deck, not a poster, not a printed book, but have it all housed in a really beautiful, bespoke digital experience where everyone in the company could see it anytime they wanted. And I was like, all right, let's do it. I'm pretty sure we blew the project budget. We killed ourselves in that final week because it was only scoped out to create the digital artifacts, and we had to do both because that's what we told the client we would do. But at the end, when we were in this good set of stress and we had this really great goal we wanted to achieve, other people also galvanized around us, and we were under the pump, but we were absolutely flying. And within that hard deadline, everyone really, really stepped up, and it led to a really successful project. The client kept working with us. We had a great time doing it, but also we could showcase a really different way of working and delivering value for the whole studio. So it was an example of like putting that stress on yourself, but again, that giddy up moment where let's just move forward, which was really cool. All right, the next group of experiences I would call good, bad. This is like a mix of both. So something bad has happened, but you're going to work through it, and you probably have learnings you can distill from it at the end when you come out stronger. And often you don't really know that there's going to be good coming out of it when you're in it, and it's really in that moment of reflection afterwards that you're like, okay, what can I learn from this? So I have a really big personal experience, which I can't not talk about because it had such a profound impact on me personally and professionally. And I listed under good, bad. And that one's being told this. For me, hearing these words was really, really tough. I came back from my honeymoon and I went to the doctor to check out a firm bit of tissue I felt. And when you hear someone tell you this, things can get pretty dark pretty quickly. And my husband, you know, he was really great. He looked me in the eye and he's like, look, we're going to expect the best outcome until we're told otherwise. And we're going to pull each other up and make sure that we're doing that. And we made that pact. And we got through it. And this was incredibly important because that mindset of we're in a shit experience, but we're going to expect the best. To manage that stress was so important. And I really realized that when I went to a support group, and I remember it was really depressing, and there were people there that like literally had already decided what was going to happen to them. They had given up and that they knew their fate. And I was like, that's not going to be me. I refuse, you know, so I just stopped going. And my husband and I created this cocoon around us where we just protected ourselves mentally. And we only listened to specialists we were interacting with, and we just assumed happy path. And so the really good thing to take away from this experience, why I say it's a good thing, is that one of those cliche things happening where you realize your mortality and you realize the value of each day because it's finite. And you come up wondering like, what on earth was I doing before wasting all this time? Why did I invest in relationships that weren't at all worth it? It, for me, spurred a career pivot. So I went from digital strategy into design. And the only way I could make that pivot is because I stopped holding back. And I went for the role I was completely unqualified for. I didn't take no for an answer. Somebody had asked me if we needed talent in the innovation lab I was working at. I was like, no, but I'm looking for a new role. And I want to speak to the founder of this company and work there. And, you know, can you get me that interview? And I asked a professor at UTS, like, can I be involved? And he's like, you can be a coach. I was like, no, I want to teach. Like, just give me a shot, give me one lesson, one lecture. And as soon as I did it, he was like, yeah, you're good. You can do this. And so we've been doing it for 3 years together. So I went for it because I only, you know, have that much time left, and we all do. But once you realize that, you really have this sense of urgency and also of purpose. So I think it's made me a better person, and it's really a good, bad experience. This next one, good, bad experience, is also a bit of a personal one. When I moved abroad, I moved away from family and friends. I grew up in Canada and I went to Holland on an exchange program. And I grew up in a really small, very sort of traditional, conservative, religious town with no diversity or economic opportunity. And I went to Holland where anything goes. And it really made me think about rebuilding my norms and values. I started looking at, why do you believe these things? You know, who do you want to be as a person? And when I realized, you know, that was going to be different than where I came from, I realized I needed to step away from the religion I grew up in. And that was going to be a really big deal, that my social circle and probably most of my immediate family would not want to have any contact with me after I had stepped away from it. And that would be permanent. So when I came to this realization, the stress of like knowing the decision you need to make, but having made it and not having processed what the outcomes and the implications for you would be was incredibly stressful. For months, I was grinding my teeth at night, and I didn't realize how much stress I was under about this big decision until my dentist was like, you're 21 and you've got the teeth of a 50-year-old, like what's going on in the space of a few months since I saw you last? So he gave me this very sexy mouth guard and sent me off on my way. And my partner was he was really patient with me. I would talk this over and over with him, agonizing what was the right thing to do. And I really had to process it and come to that point where I could just detach myself from someone else's reaction. So we talked about like action and reaction and stress living in the middle. And I had to realize I can't own it for them. I did understand the way they felt and they thought they were doing the right thing, but I didn't want to be angry at them or feel judged, and just have to let it go. And the good that comes from this is the reflection that you can have a super strong belief in something, but there's a big difference to holding on to that for yourself and imposing it on others, and also owning other people's reactions to things. So I want to teach my kids to respect belief systems and others without holding judgment. And I'm super okay that I may not have a relationship with those people because I don't think I've done everything wrong. The other thing is that your value system, it's after this experience, it's stronger than ever because it's been tested, and you really have to stand up for something that's good and you believe in. And that's a good thing, because if you don't have those deep roots, then you'll just get blown over. So out of that stress, working out who you are is like really, really important. These next group of experiences are the bad ones. I would say when we talk about chronic stress or things where there isn't really a lot of good coming out of them, you really just need coping mechanisms. How do you strengthen your resilience? How do you extend your perspective? And also, coming out of it, how do you increase your gratefulness for when things become balanced again, when it's all over and you've gotten to the end and you've come back out for air. And I would say this is definitely relevant for all of us, because we're coming out of, hopefully out of COVID soon, or, the different implications of COVID, and that economic impact has put a lot of people into this category of saying, like, I don't see the good that's coming out of it. What can I do? So for me, some other bad experiences alongside with COVID and trying to run a creative agency, this is our biggest competition right now. People keep saying over and over again, we're just taking this in-house. We're not actually getting an external to work on it. So saving a business from COVID and just getting through it and looking for ways to get relief for our spirits, for our creativity, for our finances is a really, really big challenge and source of stress right now. So everyone's really aware of, like, you need those rituals of safe self-care. But if you think about that at an organizational or team level as well, like, how do you sit down with your sales team and not talk to them about not meeting targets, but asking, like, what good things have come this week? How can we find more of those good things? And also, how do you have a robust plan so that despite all those factors that are out of your control, you can just be super clear on, it's not just you, that there's other things that are happening, and everything that you have control over, you're absolutely doing, and you're sharing that with people, and you're telling them the activity you're undertaking to change things up. But you need to make sure you can cope. So making sure you have those releases and the rituals to make sure. And in chronic stress, if it does feel paralyzing, when you've got a plan, you don't have to think. You can just do. You can just get through it. And on the days where you're doing great, you can think a bit more and maybe have more energy to put into it. But the days where it's really tough, you just sort of follow the plan, and it's a lot easier to get to the next day. The next example of bad stress was this quote. Someone said to me, "A very powerful person, whatever I ask you, the answer is yes." I think the lesson from this example is it's really okay with pulling the plug. It's really okay to fail forward. It's really okay to make peace. This was a senior partner on a project who was really not used to hearing no, and it wasn't used to the design process where you don't come in with the answer all finished. You come in with really good questions, and you explore. And so when he asked me about the scope of this consumer proposition, it was like, "Oh, is this for corporates?" I was like, "Well, no, of course not." And he was like, "I'm sorry, if I ask you, this is in scope." And I was just like, "Okay, that's a bit crazy, but this is what the brief was." But I knew in that moment, like, all right, this is not for me. I need to walk away. I'm not going to find success here. I'm not going to be able to help people the way I want to. I'm not going to be able to make an impact. And so the rest of my time in that company was just getting through that project, working towards a launch, doing the best I could, making sure my project team were okay and I was protecting them and making the best of whatever we could do. And then really being okay with leaving and looking for something else. So just bearing through it and then getting the hell out of there. And this last bad experience, so pole pole means slowly in Swahili. And our guide, we weren't given that translation. Our guide on Kilimanjaro just kept saying this over and over again. So once I got better and I got back to health, I told my partner I want to go to Africa, and we signed up for this crazy thing. And the interesting thing about doing something like Kilimanjaro is you start on the lush green rainforest floor in Tanzania. It's super flat. And there's like no reason to go slow, but you start developing this mindful cadence, and the guide's like, pole pole, and you're like, there's no challenge here. Why are we going super slow? But he's teaching you that it's a really long road and you need this really slow, predictable pace, that it's super essential. So you like listen to him, you just do it. You're like, okay, fine. He's a bit weird, but whatever. And at first you're like, this is really holding me back. You know, I just want to speed this up. But basically the first half of the trip, it holds you back. And the second half, it's literally the only thing keeping you going. It keeps you going through the terrain. It keeps you going through the steepness, through the cold and through the hunger, and also through the altitude sickness, because you literally have this march that is just sort of keeping you going. It's almost like a chant of this case. And if you follow it, you won't tire out. You can rely on it. And so you could liken this to your day-to-day rituals, your ceremonies, or, you know, that sort of Japanese belief of, you know, really seeing the value in simple things in everyday life and taking that view while you're on that march, so that you're able to stick through with it. So this is also something that I've been thinking about a lot here in COVID, to say, what is that new rhythm for me and for my teams, but also you need to stick with it, because there'll be easy days where you're like, I don't need to go pole. And there'll be really hard days where you really, really just need to be able to keep up with what pole is. So out of the good and these bad experiences, taking a step back, I think there's also just imagined that sometimes we just give our stress about what might happen on stuff that might not even eventuate. So it's really important to, like, you know, plan to worry ahead. So, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it, because often it's not actually eventuated or needed, and it's far less than what we make it for in ourselves. So with that in mind about, you know, good and bad experiences, and kind of like, what can you take from this? I was thinking about three things that have really helped me individually with dealing with stress. So the first one is making a plan, and some of it's just because I have to, because you're running an agency, but also for us as a family, like, what if you lose your job, or what if one of us gets sick, or what if something happens to our kids? If we prepare for it, then it's like, if this, then that. You don't have to worry about the what ifs, because you've literally thought of that scenario and you've got steps. You don't let the stress paralyze you, that if something does happen, you just do, and you can go and you can get traction. And it's actually really, really, really helpful. The other one is having a few things on. So side hustle and side hustle. So, you know, I've got like kids and other distractions, and I think having things to give you joy and put your emotional eggs in other baskets is really, really important, so that if one thing is down, the other thing is up. And when I moved away from design craft and at a lead and director level into more general management, I was mourning the loss of, you know, the content and the craft and the spirit of creativity, because I was stuck in spreadsheet world. So the other thing on, I was like, I'm going to go teaching, because that's my sort of spiritual highlight of the week, of exploring in an academic, exploratory world what's good. And having that balance is really important, to have a couple of things on. So yeah, you feel okay about where things are at. And this last one is focusing on what you control. So a tool I found really, really helpful that I wanted to share with you guys today was called the donut diagram. I was involved in a Google Rare Masterclass, and it's this program that's designed to help provide support and learning for diverse leadership talent in the creative industry. And so I was in the APAC cohort, and there was this fantastic module on resilience. And it left me with this diagram that I really absolutely love. And it's super simple. It's like, just understand and accept limitations and the role you play in them. So there's things you can't control, and you're supposed to like fill in this outer circle. And this could be things like the news, how other people feel about you, what other people say about you, the economy, what other people are actually doing. And you kind of fill out, all right, what are all the things that are totally out of my control? And then the really important part of the exercise is, how do you fill in that inner circle? So what are the things you can control? You can control, like, how you spend your money. You can control who you listen to and what you read. You can determine your behavior and your reactions. And you can also determine, maybe not always your time, but definitely your energy. What are you spending your energy on? And so I think the takeaway for everyone today is to really be thinking about that middle circle, about what you can control, what really lies there. Because for a lot of us, there's an opportunity to change things now. A chance also to like literally restructure your life. You're working from home, you're defining your day. You can focus on relationships that matter and are building, and decide, which people you reach out to. And so that element of like getting a hold of your situation and making the best until there's room for movement, considering the different types of stress factors that are around us, is could be super helpful. So I make this diagram. Some days I make it every day if it's a really stressful situation. And also, you know, reflect on those situations where you think you've had stress, because adults learn in reflection. We're not as great at sitting in a classroom and taking something in and then like moving forward from it, but like thinking about what happened there and don't letting that experience go to waste, and try to do something differently next time. So yeah, to kind of round it up, I really love this African proverb that says, you know, when you pray, move your feet. You know, like hope's not a strategy. You need to go and make things happen. But you really can't do that when you're paralyzed by stress. You know, when it hits you, you feel it. Maybe you embrace it and use it as motivation, and you get at it and you do something brilliant. Or maybe you make a plan, or you find an outlet, or you work on your plan B, or you find that side hustle. But if you can't find your way out, talk to someone. Finding joy in your day-to-day construct, and the constraints in front of you is really important. And I think everyone can do it. You know, you're smart and you're resourceful and you're creative, and you probably think of different ways to tackle old problems every single day. So do it for yourself. You can have ups and downs, but you're still here and you're still going. So yeah, and my final slide is, you know, you've got this, that these aren't normal times, and the rules of the game just don't apply now. We're all under pressures and we're all feeling it, but we're going to get better, and it always does. So just back yourself. You've got this.
Yay, thank you so much, Tara. Tara, told you I'd do that. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. So insightful and so much beautiful information there. Are you good to, if we do a bit of Q&A?
Yeah, sure.
Amazing. Okay. So guys, what I need you to do, we do have one question in the chat, but I'd love to get some of you guys to actually jump on and ask Tara a question. So you just need to raise your hand. So let's see, hang on, do I have any? So guys, just press the raise hand button. If you put on participants, you should find it. Who has a question? Okay, so I'll ask you one. Has anyone got a question, guys? Just raise your hand and we will unmute you.
Everyone's being nervous.
Yeah, it takes a little while sometimes. So, okay, so Tara, what I'll do is I will, anyone? Okay, so I'll ask you a question from the chat. Okay, so we have here a question from Joe, and he says, okay, it looks like all the three options involve maintaining some degree of agency in one's life. Many things are actually split, where one can control to some degree, but not completely. Yeah. What happens when everything straddles the control border?
Oh, yeah.
Didn't make sense to you?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I mean, yeah, it's like you're completely maxed out, because you're like, all right, how do I control my reaction to all of this? But at a certain point you get a bit tapped out. And you know how they say, like, try to do all the hard bits at the beginning of the day and make decisions, because you've got only so much energy, et cetera, et cetera. You know, if every day is like that, you will run out. And then it moves into that sort of episodic stress, where you're just in this rhythm of it's all under pressure and it's all too much. So you either need to like improve your coping mechanism, or you need to reduce the amount of stressors. And this is when I see a lot of team members are saying like, oh, they're like, oh, that person's flaking out. I'm like, you know what? They've actually just hit a wall. They've hit a max. This is when people, you know, kind of say like, I'm out, mental health day, and tick out. So your ability to like have that resilience, because you've gone through a lot of these situations, and have that muscle memory and going through poly to handle all of them, determines how far you can go in terms of capacity each and every day on that. And like, obviously a CEO of a big company, or somebody who's got like 10 kids, or somebody who's, having a lot of stressors on them, everyone's, what they're put in front of them and their ability to cope are all at different levels. So it's really about just knowing yourself. When are you starting to get to that max? When do you communicate to people and be like, you know what, I'm really just full right now, or can we talk about this later? And like yesterday, after this bloody tantrum of my kid, my husband's like having breakfast and telling me about how we need to unpack boxes in our new house and buy all this stuff. And I'm just like, dude, like, I just need to have a coffee and I need to breathe. And I'm just telling you right now that like, I just want to eat these eggs, and that's really all I can do right now. And like, that's okay. And so I think it's important to say that, or like knowing you've got a stressful situation coming up. So like on Wednesday I had a board meeting, and it's like explaining why clients aren't buying during COVID, like, and getting grilled on that. I said that afternoon, I can't have anything stressful happening. So I had to like clear a few meetings away and have a couple just like walks and talks with people on the phone and go into some green space and say like, I've only got so much energy for stress today. Tonight's going to be a really big one. So I need to sort of pace myself out again and just be really aware of like my limit and what's coming up. Because when we freak out and when we break is when we're not prepared for it.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Tarra. Okay, we have a question from Steph. So Steph, can you unmute yourself? Oh, I think you have. Steph, jump on in.
Oh, I actually didn't have a question, but now that I'm here, I wanted to say.
Oh, because your hand was raised.
Oh, that's really interesting. I did not raise it. That was probably just an error. But I was wondering, are there points in your week where you think it's easier to manage stress than others?
Yeah, I think at the beginning of a context switch. So I have like probably 3 big phases of my week. I have Monday, Tuesday work from home, where I feel a huge, incredibly amount of secondhand stress. So my partner's at home with 2 little kids, you know, and his ability to cope with that is very different than mine. And so I'm in the other room working, and I know there's all of this going on, and I'll come up for a coffee or for lunch or, you know, at 4:30, and there's a lot of stress I will feel and take on. So I know that that's one phase of my week. And then I know Wednesday to Friday they're in daycare, and then my stress kind of flips to the context of work as the main sort of stress generator, and like how do we get things across the line, and everyone always wants everything by Friday, and you always try to have this mental deadline on Friday. And then I think the weekend is sort of how do you get stuff done with having the kids around, and you know, you've moved house and you want to learn about your area, and you need to buy all this stuff, and you need to do like the cleaning and the shopping and the cooking and the meal planning and like talking to family and like all of that stuff. So for me, it's easier at the beginning of that context. Saturday morning for me is infinitely easier than Sunday night. Monday morning's infinitely easier than Tuesday afternoon. Wednesday, like, so I've got these moments of like this cadence of my week now. And that's sort of, I've settled into this through COVID of like, all right, I know this is coming, but then I know this is coming from my partner on Tuesday afternoon. I know this is coming from my team Friday afternoon. I know this is coming from me on Sunday evening. So it's again, managing that energy, and sure, stuff comes, shit hits the fan all the time. But as much as you can like plan or have some foresight and give yourself the breaks so you don't enter freak out, I think that's the really important thing to like over time learn. How are you affected by those things? And then how do you tweak, and how do you like optimize to make sure, you know, I'm the best mom and leader and partner throughout the week.
Thanks, that's great.
Thank you, Tarra. Okay, and we have a question from the lovely Kath. Kath, aka Catfish Creative. Jump on in, Kath.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can hear you.
Firstly, Tarra, thanks so much. That was a really beautiful, authentic and vulnerable talk, and I really enjoyed it. So my question is, and you may not have an answer to this, you may not experience it the same, but I do a lot of work on mindfulness, meditation and stress. And then when big stress episodes come, and if they come at a particularly hormonal time, that makes it worse. Sometimes when you know what to do, it almost feels like it makes it worse because it's hard to get there when you're in the episode. Does anyone else experience that? Do you experience that? I see a few people nodding. Sometimes you feel like, I feel like I should know how to get over this, and it makes it almost more stressful that you can't.
I think you have to live in the vulnerability then. Like, I'm pretty open with my team where like in my role, people expect you to be an expert at everything. So like, I'm good at talking to clients and I'm good at our design craft. I'm not good at finance and operations. Like, you know, I've got weak spots too. I'm not like a commercial director. Like I can go through all the different things, but there's like things I'm super strong at and competent. There's other things where I'm like, okay, you need to live in the vulnerability in that moment. And sometimes I can say like, I can do this, but maybe not right now, or let's just have a discussion about it and we'll come back to it tomorrow. The phrase, let's come back to it tomorrow, is massive. It's for everyone to like de-escalate. It's for everyone to just like think clearly. It's for you to like assess and regroup and like understand what you know and what you don't know. And also maybe like what others know and what they don't know, and then come back to it and have a discussion about it, because you're like living in the emotion and the content. You've got like process and emotion happening all at the same time. And it's like, why don't we just sort of, you know, break it down? And I definitely think visually and like get up on a whiteboard or even at home, like write out like, what's it all about? What is really, really happening here? What do we know, not know? And for me, that killer phrase of like, well, let's just come back to it, or let's just park that for now, like doesn't need to be solved this minute, is super helpful for everyone to just kind of have that clarity of thought. And for me as well, in a role of going like, I hit walls each and every day and have to grow and learn. It might give me time to Slack a peer of mine in London and be like, hey, have you come across this? Or to have a chat with my partner who gives me so much unsolicited advice on how I should do my job. You know, and just also to process it overnight, I think is massive.
That's great. Thanks, Tara. I've been scribbling madly.
Oh God.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have one more question for you, maybe one or two. So is it Gauri?
Yeah.
Gauri?
Gauri.
Hey.
Tara. Nice
Hello.
to see you. Hey, Tara, I'm interested in how you help your team deal with stress. So, you know, I'm doing some work in schools at the moment, and principals are having to look at students at this time, in this time of COVID, and having to balance well-being with learning, because we know we can't perform when we're stressed, in that bad stress, but they're actually having to try and help others deal with stress rather than themselves. Now, I loved what you just said about let's come back to it in the morning, but in the moment when someone that, you know, you're trying to deal with a whole group of people, as you have to, us too, how do you take the temperature of the group? How are you in the moment to help the team get the best performance it can at that time? Have you got any tips for us that I can pass on to others?
Big question, Corey. I think it's always really important, because you're in that moment, there's a lot of people, and that often like multiplies the emotion and the sense of urgency. It's always really good to kind of go like, let's assess the scale of this. You know, is anything going to fall over today? Is anything going to fall over? Like, what is the difference between possibility and probability? And then also, what is the consequence of that actually happening? Like, let's just get that on the table. That helps everyone to kind of like reset and kind of check and go, well, yeah, it's a what if, it could, blah, blah, blah. And you see everyone's shoulders just kind of relax a little bit. And then I go into the like, well, what can we control here? What can we influence? I think people like largely overestimate the impact they have in a bloody situation or in life. There is so much going on about macro factors, about just being in the right place at the right time, about momentum, you know, about synergy. There's so much stuff happening. Like, we do have an impact on things, but there's a lot that we don't. And just kind of like checking like, what is the problem? And then seeing like your place in that problem, you know, usually solve for me 70% of the stress in the room. And then it's kind of going, all right, do we make a plan? Do we need time to take away because we need more information? How do we break it down? And at the end of it, there's always that moment of coming back up to the positivity to go like, you know, you're okay. We're all really smart people. We've been here before, or we haven't, we'll give it a good shot. And you know what? We're going to make the best decision today based on what we know. And if that decision needs to change tomorrow, that's okay too. So I want them to like release themselves from that commitment of like, we have to have the best answer today. That's not the case. You need to adapt. Like, I'm moving my entire studio somewhere for like 6 months as an experiment. And you could go like, oh, well, you know, is that the right decision? I'm like, but if you position it that way to say, we think from all the information we have now and with all the, you know, the ups and downs in the market and different ways we need to work, we think this is a good decision now. And if it's not, that's okay. Let's change it up. And what's the worst thing that could happen? We have to buy some more chairs when we go to a bigger space. And everyone's really okay with that and really accepting. So I think the acceptance and emotion is, you know, 90% of it. And you can do a lot in the first instance to like get it all away from them and the stress they feel in their neck and shoulders, and get it up onto a whiteboard, or to just disseminate it, and then you can work through things.
Thank you, Tara. Wow, thank you so much for all your insights. That was incredible. And guys, can we look, Tara, I keep saying Tara. Tara cannot hear you, but can we give her some jazz hands, show some love, everyone? You can hear me clap. Woo! Thank you so much. Like I said, we've been wanting Tarra to speak for so long, so we're incredibly excited that you joined us today. Actually, Tarra, is there anything else that you want to leave the audience with before we wrap up?
No, I just want to say, like, be kind to yourselves, you know, and be kind to each other. It's a really hard go right now. It's a really hard go for this sector. But you made this decision, you know, to put your heart on your sleeve and put a price tag on it if you're working commercially. You are doing this for purpose, for the good of the world, for the good of the users and the people you design for and you build for and you create for. And that's you, that's your ikigai. And so, you know, maybe you temporarily earn money in a different way, but that doesn't change your artistic identity. So be kind to yourself and remember that you are still that person, even in the middle of a bloody global health pandemic.